Hello everyone, how you guys doing? Hopefully you're having a wonderful day. Today we are here with a video on whether or not I hate modern soccer cards. This is a comment that I've been getting a little bit either explicitly or implicitly, and I wanted to address in a greater video. I think it's a topic worth talking about, so let's go ahead and do just that. To get it out of the way right off the rip, do I hate modern? Well, if you looked at my last 9 Instagram posts, maybe you would make that assumption. I posted nothing but vintage. I've been enjoying it. It's been something I've been wandering down the path of for probably a year or two now, sort of dipping my toes. Comparatively, the 9 posts before that were all modern. Tim Howard, Clint Dempsey, some Americans that I like. Typically, if I'm in modern, I like collecting Americans or a couple particular players. I don't really have too wide of a net when it comes to that. Vintage is where I like to get a little bit crazier. If you went back before all of these posts, you would see almost exclusively modern. I do like to keep my Instagram modern focus considering the handle, but I've been changing that up a bit lately. In terms of my journey and how I've gotten to where I am in soccer cards, early on I was someone that, like my name suggests, USMNT soccer cards. I liked US players. Someone like a Weston McKennie out of 25 here was something that I was focusing on early. I quite enjoyed that, had a ton of fun with it, and over time sort of progressed out of it. I still do enjoy some of the USMNT players at times, but it's not the only thing in my bag. After that, I sort of got into Messi rookies and figured that all out, along with some other Messi cards, that being towards the end of 2020, after the first boom had kind of happened, but we weren't quite going into the second. I was someone I didn't understand why Messi rookies were so cheap when his prisms were so crazily expensive, so I bought a ton of Messi rookies, held through the peak. Quite enjoyed that. It was a fun experience. As time went on, the peak happened and had left. I was able to sort of go back and pick up some of the remnants of what was a fallen market. So I started getting into Maradona naturally as a Messi collector at the time. Maradona is a pretty easy transition. Finally, that's culminated in some Pelés recently that I have acquired. Something I was actually very eager to do early on, but I knew that I didn't know very much. The Tupinamba was all the rage at the time, and honestly, had I bought it, I probably wouldn't have made much money at all. I might even just be even, given where it was at the time. And so I'm glad that I took the more natural route of sort of working my way back and figuring it all out as I went. Ultimately, this is a journey I feel like a lot of people go on. I'm not saying the majority, I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying it's a natural thing that happens when you look at other sports card collectible segments. There are tons of people collecting vintage that didn't actually watch those vintage players play, which implies that this is something that just occurs in people. It's quite hit for me, and I'll go into a couple reasons as to why I think that is and why I've sort of worked my way backwards. Generally speaking, I'm someone that likes to zag. I'm a soccer collector in the United States. It's not necessarily common. I can't talk to all my friends about it. That's just the natural way this goes. And so for me, when I go onto Instagram, this is sort of what I see. I looked at the soccer card hashtag and looked at featured, and there were, as I figured, most all one-of-ones autograph cards of modern players, and then there was only one Lothar Matthäus rookie, which I guess you could class as vintage, but it's like borderline vintage. So ultimately, whenever you go on Instagram, which from my perspective is the hub of sports card social media, all you see is nothing but the new shiny thing. And so naturally for me, it's very easy to zag, especially when there are many other factors that make me inclined to, go a bit back in the past. And within Instagram itself, I also found a couple eye-opening accounts here with Chris Hodge and Cardboard Chronicles, but they do have a podcast where they talk collecting. And ultimately what I found is that all of the craziest collections you can imagine practically exist for every player. They are somewhere. And so Instagram brings them all together. You can sort of see them all the time, and it desensitizes me a bit to it. It also sort of makes me understand that I don't actually want these types of PCs. I am not someone that needs to go after the one-of-one or every one-of-one for a player. And for me in soccer, it would just be so much less rewarding that this type of stuff is not at all what I want to chase. And I understand that in other sports it's quite common, but for me in soccer, it's not the route I want to go at all. Another point in case of that is that tier ranking a player's best cards at this point is almost impossible. This Julian Alvarez is an example from a month ago where in a video I tried ranking his best cards. On the left-hand side I had base cards, on the bottom right I had inserts and autos, and on the top right I had short prints and case hits. And I mean, within that, you can just see it's a mess. I mean, it is an absolute mess. And this is before you consider parallels and all the intricacies that entails. And so for me, it's not intriguing at all, especially in ultra modern. In modern, it's a bit more manageable because there's only a few prominent sets each year, so I understand that. But ultra modern absolutely loses me. And then the final thing that sort of pushed me away a bit was the consistent pumping and shilling you see around numbered cards. Numbered cards are just so much more inclined to this type of activity because they don't come up as often. So if you can pump them, you're going to have more of an effect. If you can shill them, you're going to have more of an effect on what people perceive to be comps or what you could push someone up to because they don't know what the price is. Ultimately, there's been a couple content creators in soccer pushing treble specifically, Soccer Study and Calcio Cards, aka Inspire FC. A couple examples of prices just to sort of prove the point. This Messi is just an insane astronomical rise from $50 to $8,000, $5,000, and $6,000. Now you can say, well, this card was sold in 2019, which is true. So this was pre-boom of anything. So that doesn't necessarily take into account, you know, maybe soccer boom before that. So we do have another example. This is a list of Karim Benzema's on the right-hand side. As you can see, in 2021, it sold for $12. That is pre-treble pump. Once the treble pump occurs, it is then $400, $225, $400, $450, and $350. And this essentially just coming off the tail end of a couple different videos from content creators who, from what I understand, certainly own these cards and then look to sell them after the video. At what times they sell, if they sell, all this stuff, I don't know. But I know that I see these cards on auction houses, on eBay. It's just brutal and not really something I like to concern myself with. And then the shilling as well is just something that I find quite annoying, especially on cards that you're looking for. Not that I'm looking for this flawless soul of the game Ronaldo, but you would assume that this is the type of card that doesn't need shilled. I mean, one of the prices here that was shilled was $4,000. I thought this is, I mean, at least to me, this would seem like one of the best Ronaldo cards you could get, right? Why it's not getting paid at $3,900, and this is almost 2 months of reruns. There's even more before this. It's just egregious in general, and again, not really something that I'm all too inclined to deal with. So those are a few things that have run me away from modern a bit. In regard to things that have drawn me to vintage, the first one would be I love the connection to the player on the card. I love that the player is the center of the card. I think in modern, whenever you just have a full green background, or you have like Kaboom where it's trying to shine and get you to look away, or you're looking at the number on the back, what's it out of? There's just so many different things distracting you from the card itself. I think that's not doing the player justice. I also love the landscapes that you can get in vintage soccer, the nice nature pictures like this Beckenbauer. I think that this is something that a stadium club tries to do each and every year, but it's just something that comes natural in vintage, which is something that I enjoy. And then I like that you can almost feel the era within certain soccer cards, like this Mario Kempes is a 70s release, and it certainly feels the part, right? Maybe I'm just blind to it because we're living during it, but a lot of these sets nowadays don't really speak to me and say that they are of this era. I think once things just start having plain backgrounds behind them, there's really nothing to it, honestly. I feel like a lot of the sets from modern also pull from old designs too, so we're not really unique in ourselves. And so for me, that takes me to the breadth of soccer and just how much you can experience. The way I see it, it feels like you're time traveling across the globe, being able to experience so many different releases in so many different formats from countries that you sort of start to get an understanding of what they were about, what type of releases were similar. Did they have cigarette packs? Was it more stickers? Were they actually collectible cards? Was it maybe Pogs? There's just so many different intricacies and so many different ways to explore that for me, it's much more exciting. It's much more fun. I enjoy having to learn about all these different things and just sort of getting into the nitty gritty of all of this. It's just so exciting for me. I understand how for some people, maybe it might be a bit daunting. And honestly, for me at first it was, but as you sort of chip away, it all starts to make a bit more sense. But I couldn't imagine my experience in the hobby only being from buying Topps and Panini cards. To me, that is just incredibly boring. I do still do it, of course. It's not something I'm entirely cutting out, but I think if given the option, I'd love to experience everything that soccer cards have to offer. Of course, you should do that at your own pace and not necessarily overextend yourself. I try to be more and more cautious with how I go about getting into new and different items, because you do want to give yourself some sort of focus in terms of what you're going after. But for me, it's just so much more fun to explore rather than to be stuck in just a couple nooks and crannies of modern. And for me, I think it's also just a very relaxing path. There's so much less noise. Like I was talking about earlier, the pumps, the shilling, the this, the that. Of course, some of that stuff exists in vintage, but I'd say generally it's to a much lesser degree, and you can just kind of do your own thing. If you're a hermit or someone that likes to be in isolation, just kind of going about your business, I think that it's, appealing for you. Also, better retention in terms of the people around you, the community. If you've been here long enough, especially me, I started in Modern, so I saw so many people come and go. It's a bit demoralizing. Typically, the people that are into the older items are people that have probably been around longer to get there. So ultimately, they're more likely to stick around. I love the deep dives that you can do. Like I said before, it feels like you're exploring the world, treasure hunting across the globe, rather than just buying whatever just got hit by a breaker in a new pack. That doesn't really get my juices flowing. But again, that's just me. And then finally, I like that the knowledge lasts. This doesn't necessarily have to be vintage. This could be pre-modern, almost any sets before 5 or 6 years ago. I like that when you learn about those sets, you almost know that they're going to be somewhat relevant over time and that everything within it is solidified and you understand what's going on. So you can make sense of all of it and it sticks with you. If you're learning about the new hot prospect and what his best cards are, in 2 or 3 years, if he doesn't pan out, none of that knowledge that you gain will have any effect in the future. I'd rather compound the same things that are going to matter time and time again, rather than risking it on whatever the modern idea of that is. But yeah, I think that's where we're going to call it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Helps me, helps the channel. Would love to hear your thoughts down below, good, bad, indifferent. Love to see what you got to say. Just keep in mind, this is not a recruitment video for vintage. I know some people might try to say that that's what it is. It is not. This is simply me saying my route within the hobby and why I'm just a little less excited about modern than I used to be. It's not necessarily something that I went out of my way to do. It's just the natural path I've sort of found myself on here. But if you enjoyed the video and want to see more, do make sure to drop a sub. And with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day, and peace.